What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a brand new film I got to check out a little bit early, and that film is called To Catch a Killer. Directed and written by Damián, Szifron, who wrote this film alongside Jonathan Wakeham. This film stars Shailene Woodley, Ben Mendelsohn, Jovan, Adepo, Ralph Ineson, as well as many others, and tells the story of the FBI and the police looking for a mass shooter. Before we get too far into this, as usual, I'd like to say a big thanks to those beautiful people over at Vertical Entertainment for sending me over an early screener for this movie. Always a pleasure to check out any of their movies early, whether I like them or not. And today we're talking about To Catch a Killer, which comes out on April 21st in select theaters, and shortly after we'll be getting its digital release online for rentals and purchases. And so, yeah, going into this, I went in with absolutely no knowledge. I had no idea what this movie was about. I saw that they sent me a screener for it. I didn't read a synopsis, and I didn't really watch a trailer at all. I had only seen the poster, so I knew that there were some big names in here, which got me pretty excited. Most notably, the biggest names here being Shailene Woodley being the main star, as well as Ben Mendelsohn and Jovan Adepo. So really excited right out of the gate just on the cast. Now, for the sake of this review, I will be talking about what the base premise of this film is, so let's get into this. This movie starts off, and it's New Year's, and there's fireworks going off in the big city. There's a lot of things going on, and unfortunately, somebody has taken it upon themselves to start murdering amidst all this, using the fireworks for cover for their gunfire, and they end up taking out 20-something people. This ends up obviously prompting a huge search from the FBI and the police, and that's when we're introduced to characters played by Shailene Woodley, Ben Mendelsohn, and Jovan Adepo, who all come together and end up working together along with other people in the FBI and other law enforcement individuals to try to find who the killer is, try to find motive, and try to figure out how they can find this individual. And that's the base premise of the movie. I won't say much more because it's a pretty simplistic premise when it comes down to it. If I talk about it a little bit more, I might lean into some spoilers, and of course we want to try to avoid those as the movie has not yet been released, and maybe you're watching this review far before the movie has come out. Now, if you've seen the movie yourself though, and that's what brought you to this review, I want to go ahead and start this off by actually inviting you to let me know down below in the comments what you thought about this movie. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? And I'll start this off by saying, for myself personally, that I liked the first act. I found myself engaged. I was interested to see where this was going to go. I was interested in the characters. I thought the performances were pretty solid. There were some solid POV cinematography moments, as well as just some solid cinematography overall, and it seemed to be a pretty well-made cop thriller film. But unfortunately, as we were getting into the second and third act, I found that the pacing was starting to kind of be a little bit inconsistent, often having me feel either really engaged in moments and bored in others, or just flat out bored altogether. And by the time we got to the finale of the film, I ultimately didn't really feel like I connected with the overall themes and messages of the film. Like I said, this is a pretty straightforward cop thriller film where they're looking for a mass shooter. However, this film 110% has a lot of commentary on the very relevant subject matter that it is, of course, inspired by. Of course, here in the United States, within the last few years, and just within the last previous few decades in general, there has unfortunately been a rise in mass shootings, especially within the last decade. And this film definitely takes its time to have some commentary on that, the mental health element of that, sometimes the inefficiency of the police force, and various other things that are very, very present in today's world. So what I feel like I need to say here a little bit is that I should kind of throw out a bit of a trigger warning if things like mass shootings are something that really affect you, if you just get really drained seeing all of the media covering all these different things, and it just, you know, maybe is something that has happened to you. You have somebody in your family who died in one of these situations. This film does, you know, refer to things like the Las Vegas shooting, or even things like 9/11, as well as other things in this film that have happened in the real world. And there is an element of this film that does feel a little bit more difficult to watch, not because it's overly gory or something like that, but just more because it feels so relevant to what we are seeing in the world today. It's kind of crazy how a movie like this can make me feel that way, even though I love horror and I can watch the most grotesque horror movie where some fantastical monster is tearing people limb from limb. But this film definitely hits home a lot more, being somebody who is from the United States, and this being something that we see on the news, unfortunately, far too often. I also want to throw a trigger warning out there for anybody who's a vegan or just struggles with any sort of animal cruelty, because there is a portion of this film that takes place in a slaughterhouse, which we do end up seeing some animals being skinned, as well as skinned heads of these animals that are just kind of there in this slaughterhouse. So if you are sensitive to seeing animals damaged, hurt, skinned, dead, whatever the case may be, you may not want to watch this movie, because there is a portion of this film that does have that in it. But beyond that, the base premise of this movie and the real premise of this movie is just a cop detective thriller film with the FBI involved. We've seen movies like this tons before, and this movie, like I said, is leaning into a lot more of the relevant topic that we have going on here today. Even having a scene in the film where one of our detectives is going to an actual gun store to try to figure out some information on how maybe this gun was sold to the criminal that ends up killing all the people in this film. And in that same scene, you have a father buying a assault rifle for his teenage son, who's holding it in the scene in the lobby of this gun shop. So definitely some commentary there as far as the things that we've seen in the world. I think that there's going to be a part of this movie that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, and there's going to be a portion of this film that's definitely going to have its advocates, I should say. And so I'm very curious to see what the reaction to this film is, because I think there's definitely going to be split sides. But if you're somebody like myself who just wanted to see a movie and just kind of see if it has a good story and good performances, I think this movie is well made. Is really the best thing I can say. There's good performances here, there's good cinematography, there's a solid use of ambient noises, as well as a solid score. It definitely ramp up certain moments, and I won't lie, I was engaged at portions of this film without a doubt. But unfortunately, by the time we got to the third act, I just found myself not really all that attached to the characters, and I didn't really like how the story played out. And the thing I started to feel myself most disconnected with as we got into the third act of the film is the true nature of this film really trying to sympathize with the killer. Now, I think that there's definitely a lot of conversation to be had in terms of the mental health that comes to the individuals who do inflict this damage on people in the real world, as well as, you know, their upbringing, the lack of love, the lack of attention, the lack of belonging, and obviously the fact that a lot of these people come from some sort of history where their mental health has been completely abused. They usually come from a world where they weren't very loved, where they were bullied or something like that, or there's just something wrong with them. And so this movie definitely tries to lean into that, and I definitely think that's a very valid topic, but at times it feels like they sympathize with this killer a little bit more than I feel like I really would have cared to after the horrible things that he's done to innocent people that you have to watch in this film. And so as a viewer, I never really found myself really leaning into that part of this film all that much, and it often made me disconnect from the main characters. And our main character in this film, most notably, is Shailene Woodley's character, who is this cop who's tried to rise in the ranks and unfortunately has a past with substance abuse, and she just ultimately hasn't really gotten to where she needs to go. She's had a lot of depression and a lot of things that have held her back, so she tries to relate with our killer a little bit over the course of the film, and that's kind of where she helps the police over the course of the movie. And then you have Ben Mendelsohn, who is probably the main supporting character here, one of the main characters, and he's the character that is the most driven and has the most will and is absolutely focused on finding who this killer is. If you've seen Ben Mendelsohn and other things, there's definitely a very Ben Mendelsohn performance here in terms of the amount of passion his character has. And yeah, you know, I found myself really engrossed in the acting. I thought everybody was solid, but in some ways I feel like a lot of these characters were pretty one note. And when it comes to Shailene Woodley's character as the main character, I honestly felt her character was a little hollow. I never really found myself overly attached to her character, and I don't really think it's Shailene's fault, to be honest. I think she's a good actress. I've seen her in other things where I've been impressed by her performance, but in the case of this movie, I think it comes down to the writing. I don't really think her character was given a whole lot to do. She feels like one of those protagonists who's kind of just along for the ride with everything else that's going on, rather than a protagonist that's actually pushing the story forward and having an actual goal to achieve. I often found myself disconnected from her character and found myself more connected to the supporting characters, but by the time we got to the finale of the film, honestly, with the pacing issues in the second and third act and just kind of where the story ended up going, I found myself caring less and less, and I thought a pretty solid start to a movie turned into a pretty middle of the road film, if I'm completely honest. However, I do think it's a well-made film, and I do think there are going to be people who connect with this film more than me. So the question now is, what did you think about To Catch a Killer? Did you think it was a good movie? Did you think it was a bad movie? Or are you like me, where you were kind of into it for a portion of the film and it kind of lost you? Definitely curious to hear what everybody has to say. Please leave a comment down below. Hit that like button if you guys enjoy the video. Comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.